Today we are talking with Dick Crossing, and Dick's one of the oldest ex-students of All Saints College, Bathurst. Dick, I wonder, can you tell us about your very long association with All Saints College?
Yes, I had a very long association with them altogether. I was a boarder there for 7 years. I had a brother there for 8 years. Then I married Muriel Brownlow, who was an old girl of Marsden. Her brothers were at All Saints as well, and a sister at Marsden. If you take our siblings plus our own 4 children plus 4 grandchildren, that adds up to about 74 years. If you add the cousins, there's another 14, which takes it very close to 90. It is a long association.
Quite a record, isn't it? Can you tell us how different was All Saints in the early days to today?
It was completely different. For example, it was only half as old as it is now, and it was much smaller. The average, I think the maximum when I was there got up to about 100, mostly boarders. It did drop back lower than that during the war, when a lot of the boys had to go home to help their fathers on the land. The buildings in those days, the dormitory building was still there. It was there. There was another classroom out the back. There were a few sheds for the builders and those things. The recreation hall was there, and the chapel. That was the only buildings that were there. There were no buildings up near the Oval or anywhere up there at all. Much smaller.
And can you remember where most of the students came from when they attended the school?
Yes. Most of them, or I wouldn't say most of them, but a high percentage of them came from the Western districts off the land. There were quite a few there from Sydney, especially in the last year that I was there, when there was a scare down there, and some people moved their sons up to All Saints to get out of Sydney. A lot of them only stayed about a year and then went back to Sydney again.
What was the uniform like in your day?
Well, the uniform, we had black shoes, dark grey trousers, double-breasted coat with a school tie and a hat with a hat band on it with the vertical stripes on the hat band. Prefects had a school crest on the back. Strangely enough, we never wore shorts, which was most peculiar, because one of our main activities was to play marbles on the ground, and in long trousers that didn't work out too well.
It wouldn't. What about the classrooms and the dormitories where you
Yeah, well, the dormitories were as they are now, you know, up on top, but there was no blind or curtains on the side of the dormitory. Those big holes were completely open, and the wind used to come straight through. We wrapped ourselves up in everything we could put on, and we survived, but it was cold and also there was no insulation on the roof either. It looked straight up onto the roofing materials.
Gosh. Can you describe your day-to-day life as a boarder?
Well, from what I remember of it, I don't know. We just got up for breakfast, I think, and then we had breakfast, then we went to classes during the day. We had a break for lunch. We stopped somewhere in the afternoon, I think somewhere around 3 o'clock, and we'd go to sport, and then we'd have the evening meal, then there'd be an hour and a half prep at night, and then we'd go to bed.
Sounds much the same.
I think it's much the same, yeah.
Can you tell us about your headmaster at the time, Reverend Watson, and
Yeah.
maybe any other teachers that you remember?
Yes, I can remember most of the teachers. The Reverend Watson was an amazing man in a way. He was a fairly quiet sort of a man. He was an interstate tennis player in his day. He represented South Australia, so he was a good sportsman. He was a good, he liked all sports, especially cricket. The other schoolmasters I remember there were Albert Ems, of course, who I want to mention later, Henry Bellier, Colin Cameron Fraser McLeod,
Oh,
who was the deputy headmaster, Kitamura, I've forgotten his first name, he was the agricultural master. At the finish we had Troitart de Sèvres, he was a Frenchman and he taught me, or tried to teach me French. I don't think he succeeded. Then there were Don McFarland and Laurie Lee. They joined the services and they both died during the war. And then the last year we had another chap from Bathurst called Purcell, and I think that would be most of the teachers that I remember.
You remembered a lot. Do you have any stories of your association with Marsden Girls' School?
Yes, not very much because we weren't allowed. We weren't allowed to write to the girls or get any letters from girls. If a letter arrived that looked suspicious, it would be taken to the headmaster's office and he'd open it, and if it was from a girl, you wouldn't get it. We were a bit lucky if we had a sister at Marsden, because we were allowed to go over there one Sunday afternoon every term. And it was quite good because you'd say, "Hello, sis, have you heard from Mum and Dad?" And then we'd find someone far more interesting than a sister.
Yes, fair enough. Sport is a very important part of the school life today. Was it the same in your day?
Much the same, I think, although it wasn't organised as well as it is now. But no, it was important, yes.
Yes, and you played rugby?
I played rugby, yes. I was in the first 15 for 3 years. I wasn't much good at cricket. I got as far as the school second, being one of the oldest boys and stood in the school seconds, which wasn't very good. But
I believe at the end of school you got the all-round prize as well.
I won the bean prize.
The bean prize.
Yes, it was the big prize, of course, yeah. Yes, I got that.
Do you have any other interesting anecdotes you can share with us from life as a schoolboy at Saints or directly after?
Oh, not offhand. I'm just trying to think of things. School honours were different in those days. School honours for sport. You really had to represent the Bathurst district to get honours in sports, and the whole time I was there were only 2, I think, that did that. David Oliver won the all-school sports mile. Brian Jones won the broad jump in the all-schools, and there was one other, I've just forgotten his name now. He did very well at cricket. Not Elwyn Andrews, one of the Andrews anyway. He did very well, but it was very hard to get sports honours when you were with, to get it for tennis you had to beat the headmaster. And that wasn't very easy.
No, I can imagine. And you said you'd like to get back to your association with Albert Ems, the stalwart of
Yes,
all Saints.
well, I had an amazing association with Albert Ems. See, he was my school teacher for about 6 years nearly, and then he enlisted in the Air Force. When I left school at the end of '42, I joined the Air Force. I trained at the parks for nearly a year. When all my lot were going overseas, I was in hospital and I missed the draft, and all the ones I'd been with for a year all went. I was waiting for the next intake to come, and here's my old school teacher. He re-mustered into aircrew, and he was running about a month or two behind me. I suppose I went up to him and said, "How are you, sir?" I don't know. But strangely enough, we stayed together then. He was an amazing man because he was 12 and a half years older than me. He came from a different way of life. He had a family, you know, and all that. Yet we stayed together then for the next 2 years. And he mixed in well with all us young fellas. And he was known as Old Albert. And I can remember on many occasions we'd be at the pub and it'd start to get a little bit unruly, and he'd be standing there, one shoulder down, that half smile on his face, and he'd say, "I think it's about time we went back to camp." We invariably did. Yeah. He was an extraordinary man, Albert.
Well, Dick, thank you very much for sharing your memories of All Saints with us today, and I think by doing this, the memories will go on and on and on with future generations. So thank you very much.
Oh, well, it was a pleasure to be able to do it. I'm very pleased I'm still here to be able to do it.